At the edge of the world, where rocky cliffs met endless ocean and fog rolled in like whispered secrets, stood a lighthouse that hadn't guided ships for over 70 years. The last keeper had abandoned it in 1952, claiming the light showed him things that no living person should see. The building fell into disrepair, its white paint peeling away in long strips, its massive lens gathering dust behind cracked windows. But every night at exactly 3:33 a.m., the lighthouse would illuminate on its own, and those who were spiritually lost would feel an inexplicable pull toward its abandoned shores. Maya discovered the lighthouse during the darkest period of her life. She had lost her job, her marriage had crumbled, and she felt so disconnected from any sense of purpose that she spent her days driving aimlessly through unfamiliar towns, trying to outrun the emptiness inside her. One foggy evening, she found herself on an unmarked coastal road that didn't appear on any GPS map, following what felt like invisible hands guiding her steering wheel. The lighthouse appeared suddenly through the mist, its silhouette both beautiful and somehow mournful against the gray sky. Maya felt compelled to park her car and walk toward it, though every rational part of her mind screamed that climbing around an abandoned structure on dangerous cliffs in heavy fog was the worst decision she could possibly make. But something deeper than reason was calling her forward. As she approached, Maya saw that she wasn't alone. Other people were emerging from the fog like ghosts, all walking toward the lighthouse with the same mesmerized expression she imagined was on her own face. There was an elderly man moving slowly with a cane, a teenage girl with tears streaming down her face, a middle-aged woman clutching a photograph, and several others whose features were obscured by the thick mist. None of them spoke to each other as they gathered at the lighthouse's base, but Maya could sense that they all shared something essential. They were lost in ways that had nothing to do with physical location. The elderly man had lost his will to live after his wife's death. The teenage girl had lost herself to depression and couldn't remember what happiness felt like. The woman with the photograph had lost her daughter to addiction and didn't know how to find hope again. At precisely 3:33 a.m., the lighthouse beacon ignited with a light unlike anything Maya had ever witnessed. It wasn't the harsh, rotating beam she expected, but rather a gentle, pulsing glow that seemed to be made of liquid compassion. The light didn't hurt to look at directly. Instead, it felt like being seen and understood for the first time in her life. As the light touched Maya, something extraordinary happened. She began to see her life from a completely different perspective, as if the lighthouse beam was showing her a map of her soul. She could see all the wrong turns she had made, but instead of filling her with regret, this view helped her understand that every mistake had taught her something essential. The failed marriage had shown her the importance of authentic communication. The lost job had revealed that she had been pursuing someone else's definition of success, rather than her own. But the lighthouse showed her more than just understanding. It illuminated a path forward that she had never considered. Maya saw glimpses of a future where she used her experiences to help others who felt lost, perhaps as a counselor or mentor. She saw herself creating art that expressed the journey from darkness to light. She saw connections with people who would understand her struggles because they had faced similar challenges. Looking around, Maya could see that the other lost souls were experiencing their own revelation. The elderly man's face had transformed from despair to peaceful acceptance, as the light showed him that his wife's love still surrounded him, that his purpose now was to share the wisdom of their years together with younger generations who needed guidance. The teenage girl was seeing herself as the lighthouse saw her, not as a collection of flaws and failures, but as a unique person with gifts the world desperately needed. The lighthouse's guidance wasn't instantaneous or magical in the sense of instantly solving all problems. Instead, it operated like a cosmic GPS system, showing each person the next step they needed to take on their journey home to themselves. For Maya, the first step was surprisingly simple. She needed to start writing about her experiences. transforming her pain into stories that could help others feel less alone. As the night progressed, the lost souls began to interact with each other, sharing their stories in hushed, reverent tones. Maya learned that the elderly man was named Robert and had been a teacher for 40 years. The teenage girl was Lily, an artist who had stopped creating after being told her work wasn't commercially viable. The woman with the photograph was named Carmen, and her daughter was actually in recovery, but Carmen couldn't let go of her fear long enough to celebrate the progress. They realized that the lighthouse had brought them together for a reason. They could help guide each other home. Robert could mentor Lily in her artistic journey, helping her rediscover the joy of creating without worrying about commercial success. Carmen could share her experience with Maya, helping her understand that supporting someone through recovery required letting go of control. Maya could show Lily that young people's perspectives and creativity were desperately needed in a world facing unprecedented challenges. The lighthouse seemed to approve of these connections, its light pulsing more brightly as the lost souls formed bonds with each other. They understood that while the lighthouse had initially guided them to this physical location, its true purpose was to connect lost people with each other so they could help navigate their journeys together. As dawn approached, the lighthouse's beam began to dim, but something had fundamentally changed in each person who had experienced its guidance. They weren't suddenly fixed or healed completely, but they now had something they had lost: a sense of direction, a community of people who understood their struggles, and most importantly, hope that the journey home to peace was possible. Before parting ways, they exchanged contact information and made plans to meet regularly, creating their own informal support group. They decided to call themselves the Lighthouse Seekers, dedicating themselves to helping other lost souls find their way home to peace, just as they had been helped. Maya returned to the lighthouse many times over the following months, and each visit revealed new aspects of its mysterious guidance. She learned that the lighthouse operated according to emotional tides rather than ocean tides. It would shine most brightly during full moons when human emotions ran highest, and people were most likely to feel lost and desperate. She discovered the lighthouse had been guiding lost souls for far longer than anyone realized. Research in local libraries revealed centuries-old journals describing people who had been drawn to this location during their darkest moments and found inexplicable comfort and direction. The lighthouse seemed to be built on a spot where the veil between despair and hope was particularly thin, where lost souls could more easily find their way back to themselves. The Lighthouse Seekers group grew as members brought other lost souls to experience the beacon's guidance. They developed rituals around their visits, arriving in silence to honor the sacredness of the experience, sharing stories after the light appeared, and making commitments to take specific actions toward their healing before they left. Maya eventually wrote a book about her experience called The Light That Finds You When You're Lost, which became an unexpected bestseller that connected her with thousands of other people who had felt spiritually adrift. She received letters from readers around the world describing their own lighthouses, physical places or metaphorical beacons that had guided them home when they couldn't find their way alone. The most beautiful discovery Maya made was that once you had been guided home by the lighthouse, you became a lighthouse for others. Every person who found their way back to peace and purpose began naturally radiating a light that could help guide other lost souls. The lighthouse had created not just individual healing but a multiplication of light that would continue spreading long after any single structure ceased operating. On the anniversary of her first visit, Maya returned to find the lighthouse surrounded by dozens of people who had all been guided there by the same inexplicable pull. They stood together in silence as the beacon illuminated, each receiving exactly the guidance they needed most. In that moment, Maya understood the lighthouse's ultimate lesson: that being lost was not a permanent condition but a temporary displacement from your true path, and that there would always be light waiting to guide you home if you were brave enough to seek it.